All right, it's all yours, Jeffrey.
Okay, thanks. All right, first of all, happy Easter, everybody. It's Easter over here. We're one day ahead of here in Japan, and I hope you can all celebrate it in your own way. Okay, so here is, uh, okay, let's see. Oh, I have a signal here, host disabled participant screen sharing. So could you let me share my screen, please? Or I can send you the,
I apologize. Let me get you set up here. Should work now. I apologize.
great, no, not at all. And let's see, here we are. Okay. Start here. All right. Let's see. I have to do the whatchamadiggy. Okay, here's slideshow. Good. All right. Okay, so let me do that. Hmm. All right, so here is a picture of a phoenix. And this is kind of the modern phoenix. It's a mixture of all kinds of different things. It's not strictly Western and it's not strictly Chinese, and it's computer generated. Um, but the real phoenix has a very interesting history. It's very different from what we assume. So I think when you say phoenix, most of us have the idea of a bird who somehow self-immolates and arises from its own ashes. And it's a symbol of resurrection, as Dawson suggested. And also just, some sort of mysterious continuity that's related to fire and flight and the beauty of birds. But actually, it didn't start out that way at all. And so let's get going about how it started. Um, so it started in Egypt, and the phoenix was called the Bennu, and the Bennu was on a stone called the Benben stone. And here we see it as a gray heron. This is from the Middle Kingdom, which is about 4,000 years ago. But it originally may not have been a heron. And we'll find out more about that in a sec. So you can see here, this is Heliopolis, where Ra, the sun, was worshipped at the temple here. Heliopolis, of course, is a Greek word and was coined when after Alexander's generals took over Egypt. But at the very top of this obelisk here, there was the Benben stone of the phoenix. So the word Bennu is related to the word. This is from a book called "The Complete Gods and Goddesses of Ancient Egypt." The word Bennu is related. Hello.
We hear you.
Yeah, is somebody telling me something? Okay, so the word Bennu is related to the word Weben, to rise, as well as to the Benben, the upthrust sacred stone of Heliopolis. The Bennu bird was an important avian deity, originally of solar connections, which came to represent three major gods, Atum, Re, and Osiris. So I think it came to represent these gods in kind of that order. So the oldest connection was Atum. And Atum is, as we'll find out, the father of the gods. He himself is self-generated, just as the Bennu bird is thought to be self-generated. So Bennu is thought to have derived from Weben, which means to rise or to shine. But there's a related word, BN. And I think, for example, in Hebrew, often the vowels are not written. And I think that might be a characteristic of Semitic languages or languages like Coptic. But in any case, BN means circle or revolution, and also to depart and to return. And moreover, Ben or child, it means child or son in Hebrew. It's like Jacob ben Simeon, Jacob, the son of Simeon. And so it may derive from the Proto-Afro-Asiatic verb bin ban, which means to beget. So this kind of makes sense when you think that this bird was there at the beginning of the universe before anything else. Then yeah, it begat the universe, and it represents this circular revolution in which the universe evolves or unfolds. But also at the same time, it means to rise and to shine, because it rose on out of the the ocean of primordial chaos, and it shone like the sun. And the phoenix is in Egypt was often associated with the first ray of the morning sun. So Benben was a mound that arose out of the primordial waters of Nu or Noon. And Blavatsky talks a lot about Noon. She says that Noon, which happens to be the 14th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, but Noon was also the father of Joshua, and Joshua is a name for Jesus. Origen, in his commentary on Joshua, just refers to Joshua as Jesus. The name means savior. But in any case, there's these primordial waters, and those are and this mound which arose out of the waters is the one on which the creator deity Atum settled. And pyramidions, okay, this is good for anybody doing crossword puzzles, I think. You learned a new word, pyramidion. But they're the capstones of the pyramids. Like I showed before, it was on the obelisk. And all of these were modeled on the original Benben. And this one topped the Black Pyramid of Amenemhat III. I think he was also from the Middle Kingdom, if I'm not wrong. And Benben stone once crowned the obelisk in the Sun Temple at Heliopolis, like we saw in the previous slide. So Atum is a very ancient Egyptian god thought to have risen through self-generation at the dawn of creation, appearing on the Benben stone of the chaotic waters of Noon. I don't believe that there was any other deity who was self-generated. Atum was the one. And he generated, or his children generated deities, I think the first 8 deities. And these 9 deities, including Atum, were the main deities of Egypt in the early period. And what I find interesting about the name Atum is that there are a lot of significant names that have A, T, and M, T or D, because D is just the voiced form of T. And for example, Atum, Adam, Atom, Atma, and Amita, as in Amitabha Buddha or Amitayus Buddha. So let's look at that a little bit closer. So Atum means to be complete, to finish. And so Atum is identified with the sun, but especially with the setting sun. And in this respect, he's similar to the Buddha of boundless light and life, Amitabha, and that's Amida in Japanese, who is said to dwell in the Western Pure Land. And a lot of peoples have the idea of paradise being in the West. For example, the Greeks had the Hesperides, and the Celts had Avalon. The Chinese had Kunlun, which they believed was in the western extremity, and it's where the Yellow Emperor was said to live. And this primordial being, Amitabha, is depicted as red, just as the first man, Adam, has a name that means red. Adam means red, or red earth. So you see already that, I don't know if scholars would acknowledge this kind of thing or not, but you see some sort of connection between these various ideas. I mean, Atma being the primordial principle, atom, out of which everything else grew, and so forth. So anyway, Atum was this primordial god, a creator. And Atum is in the pyramid texts, which is, I believe, the oldest literature of Egypt. He's identified with Bennu. I mean, when you say identify, it means, okay, there's an overlap, or in some sense, he's the same, and maybe in other senses different. And Koprer, here, Atum Koprer. Koprer is the aspect of the sun that is the morning sun, and then Ra is the midday sun, and Atum is the evening sun. So Atum Koprer, you became high on the height, you rose up as the Ben stone in the mansion of the Bennu in On. You spat out Shu, you expectorated Tephanut. So Shu and Tephanut are the children, the son and daughter of Atum. And then in the coffin texts, which are later work, I am Atum, I who was alone, I am Re at his first appearance. I am the great God self-regenerator, who fashioned his names, Lord of gods, whom none approaches among the gods. I was yesterday, I know tomorrow. The battlefield of the gods was made when I spake. Interesting idea, the battlefield of the gods, because principles are always clashing. I mean, that's sort of a major theme of the secret doctrine. Why, a universe that's unitary, basically, everything is one. Why are there constant clashes and between the gods and people as well? I know the name of that great God who is therein. Praise of Re is his name. I am that great phoenix, which is in, or the Bennu, which is in Heliopolis. So it's funny. I mean, we don't usually think of a bird being a god. We say it's a symbol or it's a vehicle. Okay, but why can't a bird be a god? I mean, why couldn't Atum and the phoenix or the Bennu be the same? And I guess in some sense they are. And as Blavatsky says, anyway, everything that exists is a symbol of reality, which is invisible. So speaking of which, here's Atum versus Apep. And Apep is a serpent of chaos. And so Atum fights him off. Okay, that's what a creator has to do. But Atum himself was a serpent before he rose out of the deep and became the bird, or landed on the Bennu mound and created the rest of the deities. And then at the end of the cycle, he will become a serpent again and return to the primordial waters. So I think we have to make a distinction between the serpents that is sort of a protective serpent, and here we see a serpent that is chaotic. And when, I'll just say, I learned the Japanese flute, and the highest in Japan, everything is ranked, everything is hierarchical. So the very highest pieces, which are transmitted not on paper but by word of mouth from one's flute teacher, are called chaos pieces, Rankyoku, because there's a sense that chaos, or a state of what seems to us chaos, is the highest state of freedom. When we're down here on the physical plane, everything is basically set by physical laws or other kind of laws. But as you go up to a higher level, to the pure land of Manjushri, for example, in one of the, this is for a play, a no play, they have these little lions dancing around on the stage, and all of them are moving in different ways. And that's sort of to represent not chaos, but the freedom. Nothing is determined in that world. So I just want to make a distinction here between the chaos that largely human beings create and the chaos in the cosmos, and then some higher chaos out of which the cosmos is born. Now let's go back to this book, The Complete Gods and Goddesses of Ancient Egypt. As an aspect of Atum, the Bennu bird was said to have flown over the waters of Nun before the original creation. So it's something like the Spirit of God moving over the waters in Genesis. According to this view, the bird finally came to rest on a rock, at which point its cry broke the primeval silence and was said to have determined what was and what was not to be in the unfolding creation. Wow, a pretty big role there. In other words, it's a logos, okay? And it's the first word, and also it determines what's going to happen. The Bennu was also said to be the Ba, or a psychological constituent of Re, like a part of its soul. And by the late period of the hieroglyphic sign depicting the bird was used to write the name of the chief sun god Re. Believed to constantly rise anew like the sun, the Bennu bird was called the Lord of Jubilees, which doubtless led to the conception of its long life, and it became the prototype for the Greek phoenix, which renewed itself in a fiery death like this rising sun at dawn. Actually, this is wrong because the Greek phoenix did not renew itself in a fiery death. That came later. So you see, even we have some sort of preconceptions about what the phoenix is, and it's something that was a work of evolution, let's say. So, what was the phoenix? Was it a yellow wagtail or a gray heron, or was it something else? Okay, this is a debate between. I have to turn this off. I didn't think that would happen. Okay, and actually, we'll see that in a lot of sources it says that the phoenix is red, so it's neither of these birds. Could be. Okay, so let's do a Ben review. It's self-generated. It is a primordial creation. It created names and forms. It's the original sound. It was the firstborn. It's sun, light. It's it arose from the primordial chaos, water, nu and noon. Mound, stone. Okay, the mani. A bird, snake. Okay, there's a theme of bird and snake already here. The snake being transferred into a bird and back into a snake. It's yellow, gray, red. Those are some of the colors associated with it. And the red could be a kind of purplish. Actually, the name Phoenix in Greek is associated with Phoenicia. In other words, what we now would call Lebanon or Palestine. And that area was famous for its purple dye. And so that's why somehow Phoenix was said to be red or red purple. And then it's associated with completion of the cycle and the afterlife, and finally, just in general with cycles and a return. It's a lot in one little bird. Okay, so now we come to the Greeks. And this is Herodotus. He's the father of history. How am I doing for time? I should look on my clock here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And he's the one that really got the ball rolling in what he had to say about in his history. He's called the father of history. He wrote a book, History. And Herodotus traveled all over the place. And he went to Egypt. And what he wrote is some of the best information that we have about ancient Egypt. There's another sacred bird, the name of which is the phoenix. I never saw one myself except in pictures, for indeed it comes but rarely. The people of Heliopolis say only every 500 years. They say that he comes at the time his father dies. Okay, they say means they say that, but is it true? If he is indeed like his pictures, again, he's kind of caveating, he would be of this kind and of this size. He has gold on his wings, which are otherwise mostly red, and the outline and size of him are likest to most like an eagle. The people say that this bird manages the following contrivance, though for my part, I do not believe it. He sets out from Arabia and conveys his father to the shrine of the sun, and he carries his father emplastered in myrrh and buries him in the sun's shrine. The manner of his conveyance is this. First, after he forms an egg of myrrh of a weight that he is able to carry, and after that he tries carrying it. Okay, and by the way, this picture is from much later, it's from medieval times. So, like I said, Herodotus doesn't even mention fire at all in this. Okay, so he makes this egg out of myrrh, and when the trial of it is over, when he tests this egg, he hollows out the egg and stows his father's body into it. And with more myrrh, he plasters over the place he had hollowed out and stowed his father within. When his father lies within it, the weight is then the same as at first. And so, having plastered it over, he carries his father to the shrine of the sun in Egypt. This is what the bird does, they say. Okay. So, this is really kind of an incoherent story because, first of all, like, how is a phoenix born? And evidently, the son is there at the same time as the father, I guess. And in what sense is the father of the son if the son is self-generated? So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, which left a lot of room for later writers to embroider and develop this. Again, this is a much later, I think it's a medieval picture, and pretty interesting, beautiful one. Okay, so that's from Herodotus's great book, History, which is really a good read. And then much later, several centuries later, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 centuries later, another great writer, Ovid, wrote about the phoenix, and he wrote. I think this this is from his book Metamorphoses, which is really Shakespeare used it. Lots of other writers were influenced by it, and it talks about the way one thing changes into another. And so all these various birds, however, derive their origin from something other than themselves. There is one living thing, a bird, which reproduces and regenerates itself without. I think this is one sentence. There's one living thing, namely a bird, which reproduces and regenerates itself without any outside aid. So the phoenix is the only creature that does that. The Assyrians call it the phoenix. It lives not on corn or grasses, but on the gum of incense and the sap of balsam. Okay, so this is something new. And when it has completed 5 centuries of life, it straightway builds a nest for itself. So we're working with unusual beak and claw in the topmost branches of some swaying palm. Palm, the word for palm in Greek also sounds like phoenix. So that's so Ovid decided to get in. Ovid wrote in Latin, but anyway, he knew that. Then when it has laid a foundation of cassia and smooth spikes of nard, chips of cinnamon bark and yellow myrrh, it places itself on top and ends its life amid the perfumes. Okay, it doesn't say it burns itself up. I mean, but that's unclear. Then they say a little phoenix is born anew from the father's body, fated to live a like number of years, 500 years. And when the nestling is old enough and strong enough to carry the weight, it lifts the heavy nest from the high branches and, like a dutiful son, carries its father's tomb, its own cradle, through the yielding air till it reaches the city of the sun, where it lays its burden before the sacred doors within Hyperion's temple. Hyperion being the sun god. So, I'm going to write a little bit. This is over several centuries about changes that took place in the image of the phoenix. Neither Herodotus nor Ovid speak explicitly about the connection of the phoenix with the divine. It's just, talking like about any bird. Herodotus does not touch on how phoenixes are generated. Father and son seem to be alive simultaneously. While Ovid says that the phoenix is self-generating, the baby phoenix is somehow born anew from his father's body. So that's unclear. The 500-year lifespan given by both authors does not seem rooted in any extant Egyptian tradition. And later, there's all kinds of lifespans for the phoenix, and some of them are connected with like major astronomical cycles. Both speak of myrrh, which is a substance used in Egyptian embalming, and in chrism, the anointing oil. So when we say Christ is the anointed one, the anointed king. And he's anointed with oil, which presumably has a lot of myrrh in it. That's one of the chief, maybe the chief ingredient, along with the oil, olive oil itself. And the person who anoints Jesus seems to be Mary Magdalene. So it's interesting. Jesus becomes Jesus Christ through the action of a woman who anoints him. And actually myrrh, the word myrrh is the root of Miriam and Mary. They derive, it's not from ocean, not from sea. That's Latin. If you look at Miriam and Mary are Hebrew names, and they derive from myrrh, which indicates bitterness. And I want to say just bitterness is really important in the Bible. So as soon as Moses and the children of Israel cross over to the Sinai Peninsula, water is a problem, and the first miracle sort of that Moses accomplishes is turning bitter water into sweet. And he later does the same thing, I think, at Meribah. And he attributes that to himself and not to God, which is why Moses is left to die in the wilderness, because he didn't recognize the action of God. But anyway, myrrh is very important. It was, like I said, it was used in embalming, so it has that connection with a higher or the invisible world. Ovid adds many other fragrant substances and connects the phoenix with Assyria. Well, Herodotus only speaks of Egypt and Arabia, and then the element of fire doesn't enter into either narrative, and in both of them, the phoenixes are completely male, which is something that also changes. So this is a Roman imperial coin. I'd say it's from around the 300s. It's the Constantine family. And you can see here, this is a phoenix. And the phoenix has this big aura around it. So the phoenix really caught on in Rome. It was interestingly, it's a completely foreign concept, but the Romans adopted it. Now, here's a really beautiful poem about the De Ave Phoenix. And this is by Lactantius, who was a Roman poet. And I think he was a Christian. He's depicted as that here. And he reworked materials we're familiar with and gave it kind of a more Christian context, willing ascent from heaven to this world, and then rebirth after that through self-willed death. The phoenix is female. And I want to mention that anima and psyche, the words for soul in Latin and Greek, these are also female nouns. And according to Plato, in the dialogue Phaedrus, the soul is the self-moving principle in the human constitution. So again, you can see something moving means it's not moved by something else. So in a certain way, we all are phoenixes on that level. As souls, we're self-generated. We continue. So that's in my opinion one meaning of the idea of the phoenix. Okay, so this is kind of a long poem. I like it. It's really quite beautiful. Attended by a chorus of birds, she flies through the heaven, and a crowd accompanies her, exulting in the pious duty. But when she has arrived at the regions of the pure ether, this is after originally the phoenix in the poem was in a kind of paradise, but then she dies, and then she returns, attended by a chorus of birds, and she flies through the heaven. And when she has arrived at the regions of pure ether, she presently returns. Afterwards, she is concealed in her own regions. But, O bird of happy lot and fate, to whom the god himself granted to be born from herself, whether it be female or male, or neither or both, happy she, who enters into no compacts of Venus. In other words, who's not hitched, who's not married. Death is Venus to her. Her only pleasure is in death. That she may be born, she desires previously to die. She is an offspring to herself, her own father and heir, her own nurse, and always a foster child to herself. She is herself indeed, but not the same, since she is herself and not herself, having gained eternal life by the blessing of death. So this is sort of in a Christian framework with a beautiful hymn to transformation. Now, we're going to jump forward. There's a lot of writers and major writers who use the phoenix, but this is Petrarch. And Petrarch is one of the fathers of the Renaissance and also of humanism. He was a monk, and then he saw a woman, Laura, and fell in love with her from afar. He never talked to her, but that love, he led him to quit his vocation as a priest, and he became a great poet and writer, one of the greatest of Italy and the Renaissance. So, Monica, could you read that? This sonnet? This is a sonnet to his beloved Laura. Oh, can't hear.
I'm sorry. Here we go. The Phoenix of Petrarch, 1304-74. This phoenix forges with her golden plumes, without the help of art, a jewel bright for her beautiful neck so smooth and white that it soothes every heart and mind consumes. She forges nature's diadem to inspire the air around with light. Love's silent spear draws out of it a liquid, subtle fire that burns me even in the chilliest air. In purple gown and with an azure stole, full of roses her fair shoulders she veils. A new attire, a beauty single soul. She stores and hides in her sweet lap the leven and the rich legends of Arabian tales, this stately bird that flies across our heaven.
What a tribute, you know. I bet a lot of women would like a poem like that written about them. Okay, so but now there's on another note. This is a picture of kind of a monk-like Petrarch, and now he's writing about himself as a phoenix, so to speak. So could you read this also, Monica?
The most diverse and new thing to be found in an outlandish clime, if one can judge my rhyme, is most like me. To this love I have come. Where the dawn leaves its home, there flies a bird alone, without a mate. From voluntary fate, it dies and is reborn and lives anew. Like this, my will is true to solitude. Like this, it likes to climb on top of its high thoughts, watching the sun. Like this, soon is gone. Like this, it comes back where it knew its prime. It burns and dies and then regains its nerves, and its old life, like the phoenix, preserves.
So this is definitely somebody who likes to contemplate and is describing that phoenix-like motion of the soul. Yeah, so sonnets are so cool anyway, you know. But Petrarch wrote some of the very best. And now we'll move on to another sonnet writer. But this is not a sonnet of Shakespeare. It's a long poem called The Phoenix and the Turtle. And this, I was really surprised when I first read it. I like Shakespeare a lot. I read his plays regularly. And it's mystical. It's a purely mystical poem. Probably a lot of people have not read this. It's not a really famous work like, I don't know, Venus and Adonis or The Rape of Lucrece among his poems. But it's well worth reading. It starts with, sort of admonitions to various birds not to come and some others to come. There's going to be a funeral. And the funeral is the phoenix and the turtle. So when I saw the title in East Asia, the turtle is associated with the crane. You can see in this picture, there's a turtle here and then a crane. And both are symbols of immortality or long life. Turtles really do live a very, very long time. But in this case, Shakespeare's not talking about a turtle. He's talking about a turtle dove, like a pigeon. So the phoenix and the dove. And this is in the middle of the poem. So, and the funeral is for the phoenix and the dove. So they sort of burned up together because they're one. That's the idea. There's the phoenix and then the smaller, modest dove, but ultimately they're one. So here the anthem does commence. This is the beginning of the poem in the honor of the phoenix and the dove. Love and constancy is dead. Phoenix and the turtle fled in a mutual flame from hence. So they loved as love in twain, had the essence but in one. Two distincts, division none. Number there is love, there in love was slain. Hearts remote, yet not asunder. Distance and no space was seen, twixt this turtle and his queen. But in them, it were a wonder. So I think it somehow is talking about, the union. Maybe it could be the union of twin souls, of people who have a deep connection on a cosmic level, almost. But it could be the union of the oversoul, or perhaps the world soul and the individual soul as well. I'm not sure. This is not the end of the poem, by the way. So if you're interested, please check it out. Okay, now we're going to move across Eurasia to something completely, and this is about China, and we're going to see something else. Here's another red bird, and this is really ancient. It dates back 8,000 years, which is long. I mean, even by ordinary history, that's pretty long. But they found evidence of this particular foursome in archaeological evidence that it existed about. I think it was 6,800 BC. So the ancient Chinese divided the ecliptic, and the ecliptic means the belt in the sky where eclipses take place. In other words, the circular path that the sun and the moon pass through, into 4 parts, each of which was represented by an animal. And each of these parts includes 7 mansions for a total of 28. So the Chinese divide, I think in India, they have 27 so-called asterisms or constellations that divide the sky into Rohini and so on. But in China, there's 28. And like I said, this 4-fold scheme is really, really old. So you have for winter, I think maybe in the next one I'll say this. Okay, but I'll just say, here, this turtle which has a snake tail, and that's in winter. And then spring is a dragon. And then summer is this fiery bird. And then the white tiger is autumn. So these 4. And this appears in a lot of literature, including very old literature, like the Book of Rites. I think the I Ching as well. That's right. So the Chinese have what's called the 5 elements, or the 5 phases, and they all have these different correspondence. So in the East, like I showed you, there's an azure dragon, and dragons and snakes and so forth have scales. Spring is associated with the element wood, and on the planet Jupiter, and it's called Yang Yang. So Yang is just getting going. It's kind of, things are warming up. It's like where we are right now in the northern hemisphere. And then south, there's a vermilion bird, vermilion being a very bright red, and not scales, it has feathers. Summer, fire, Mars, old Yang. So Yang kind of reaches its apex. And then we go on to the west, that's a white tiger. And tigers obviously have fur or hair. So each of these represents a class of animals or class of beings. Autumn, metal, and Venus is in the west. And then Yang and Yin. Then north is the black turtle or the snake. It's in a shell, obviously, so that's a type of being. And then winter, water, Mercury, and old Yin. And then in the center, sometimes is depicted the qilin, which is kind of, nowadays it means, in Japanese, it means giraffe, but it's a kind of mythical animal. I don't think I have a picture here. And it's naked, because the human is a naked animal, and it's Earth and Saturn, the planet Saturn. So that's for your delectation. So there we have again, the Pralaya is the snake, and the Manvantara is the bird, to put it in most extreme terms. So this is what we saw in Egypt as well. So Atum in his sleep or Pralaic form is a snake, and then turns into a bird in the Manvantara, and then returns to the snake form. So that's one meaning of the phoenix is the Manvantara. And the Manvantara renews itself periodically. Okay, we know that. I mean, Manu is thought to be 14 Manus, and each takes turns. So that could be also a meaning of the phoenix. But we see it's interesting, isn't it? The overlap of Egypt and China. Blavatsky, and I think this is early on, maybe in the first volume of Zirkov's writings, talks about the Sino or Tibetan, Chaldeo-Tibetan esotericism, as opposed to the purely Hindu esotericism. So there seems to have been a link, and there's a lot of evidence of this. For example, pagodas and ziggurats. Ziggurats are those kind of buildings that you see in ancient Babylonia, and then you have the pagodas in China. They're similar. Okay, I'm just giving you sort of a superficial example, but if you look into symbolism, there's a lot of ties, unusual ties between China on one hand and Babylonian and Hebrew symbolism on the other. But anyway, okay. Now we're going to go to a thinker or a sage, and a book that probably is the most popular book of philosophy in China, and is Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi is a lot of fun, and it has lots of images, which everybody likes. We like pictures and all of that, right? So this book begins. This is the very beginning of this very important book. Zhuangzi is now classified as a Taoist, and sort of follows in the same non-Confucian course as Lao Tzu, who is much earlier. So in the northern darkness, there is a fish, and his name is Kun. The Kun is so huge, I don't know how many thousand li is like a mile. I don't know how many thousand li he measures. He changes and becomes a bird whose name is Peng. The back of the Peng measures, I don't know how many thousand li across. And when he rises up and flies off, his wings are like clouds all over the sky. When the sea begins to move, the bird sets off for the southern darkness, which is the lake of heaven. Okay, so my understanding is that the southern darkness is where we are right now. Samsara or the Manvantara. And the bird sets off, and that's what this is talking about. Okay, continuing. This is a Japanese depiction of Peng. So how are you going to fit this big bird onto one thing? So the Japanese just drew this little part of the wing to say, hey, we're not going to get this on paper. And then they have below these ships, and some are just dwarfed by this gigantic wing. The Universal Harmony, that's the name of some book, records various wonders, and it says, when Peng journeys to the southern darkness, the waters are roiled for 3,000 li. He beats the whirlwind. Okay, so here's Fohat, and rises 90,000 li, setting off on the 6-month gale. Okay, it could be the June gale, but it could June or July gale, but it also could be a gale that lasts 6 months. In other words, that's a Manvantara opposed to the Pralaya that lasts the other 6 months. Wavering heat, bits of dust, living things blowing each other about. The sky looks very blue. Is that its real color, or is it because it is so far away and has no end? When the bird looks down, all he sees is blue too. If water is not piled up deep enough, it won't have the strength to bear up a big boat. Pour a cup of water into a hollow in the floor, and bits of trash will sail on it like boats. But set the cup there, and it will stick fast, for the water is too shallow and the boat too large. If the wind is not piled up deep enough, it won't have the strength to bear up great wings. Therefore, when Peng rises 90,000 li, he must have the wind under him like that. Only then can he mount on the back of the wind, shoulder the blue sky, and nothing can hinder or block him. Only then can he set his eyes to the south. So he's saying, if you want to do something big, you got to have the support. Here, it's the material cause, to use Aristotle's word. They're talking about water and wind, water and air. The elements have to be there. So you have to have, I don't know what that would correspond to. I guess it would correspond to virtue or wisdom. Water, as Blavatsky says, is sometimes a symbol of wisdom. Ea, the Babylonian god of wisdom, was the god of water. Before him was Nebo. This is according to HPB, and it's interesting that Nebo and Bennu is a trend, has the same B and N there, but who knows? Now, so he's talking about what's necessary to do big things like what Peng is doing. And then it's his kind of satirical note. The cicada and the little dove laugh at this, saying, "When we make an effort and fly up, we can get as far as the elm or the sapwood tree, but sometimes we don't make it and just fall down on the ground. Now, how is anyone going to fly 90,000 li to the south?" Such is the difference between big and little. Okay, so that's in chapter 1, the beginning of chapter 1 in a chapter called Free and Easy Wandering. Now, he had something after this, and Lietzu was also in the Taoist school, and Zhuangzi was having fun. He criticizes Lietzu or points out Lietzu's something he needs to do better. Lietzu could ride the wind and go soaring around with cool and breezy skill. But after 15 days, he came back to earth. As far as the search for good fortune went, he didn't fret and worry. So he was beyond that stuff. He escaped the trouble of walking, but he still had to depend on something to get around. If he had only mounted on the truth of heaven and earth, ridden the changes of the 6 breaths, and thus wandered through the boundless, then what would he have had to depend on? Well, he would have been really free. He would have had that free and easy wandering if he'd done that, but he didn't. He was still kind of, in samsara. Therefore, I say the perfect man has no self, the holy man has no merit, the sage has no fame. So it's a really interesting book. It's a fun read, but also there's a lot of meat there in Zhuangzi. I want to introduce Peng. Well, the idea of Kun and Peng, of the submarine deity and giving way to the bird. Okay, so something about their names. Chinese characters are often made of 2 or more elements. Kun's name is what you see there, and it combines the word for fish with another word that indicates the sound, kun. But the latter word also is used in the word for chaos. So it could indicate that the fish or submarine being that dwells in the primordial chaos. Then Peng's name used to be pronounced Beng, which, kind of interestingly sounds a lot like Bennu. It combines bird with Peng. And Peng is a character that means friend. Peng Yao is friend in Chinese. Or mate. So the ideograph is 2 shells that are tied together. So it has the idea of duality, but a duality that's joined. So this is the 2 shells tied together. And this is the word for kun. It's a bug with a lot of legs. Not sure about that. That means chaos, but anyway. So the Chinese, I think, nowadays, like the initial slide that I showed, our idea of the phoenix is often connected with the Chinese phoenix. And this is the Feng Huang. The Feng is the male and the Huang is the female. Or sometimes it's just one idea. The Feng is one of the 4 sacred animals mentioned in the ancient Book of Rites. This is one of the 5 Confucian books. It's an important document, along with the dragon, turtle, and jiling. That's kind of the short giraffe-like animal I mentioned before. So back in the 19th century, it was translated by James Legge as phoenix, and the name, or rather the confusion, has stuck. The ancient pronunciation was byung or bloom. So again, kind of similar to Bennu. I'm not going to push that one. Now, the emperor was often represented by a dragon, and here we have a male and female phoenixes, a phoenix couple, kind of like the Mandarin ducks. But here you have the dragon symbolizing the emperor and the phoenix symbolizing the empress. And these may have been the robes of, I'm not sure about this, but the Empress Cixi. Cixi was the Dowager Empress in the 19th century who basically undertook the modernization of China. She was an amazing person. And a very good biography of her was written by Jung Chang, who also wrote, what was that about? Wild Swan. That's the biography, semi-autobiography of her grandmother, her mother, and herself, 3 women in China from in the 20th century. So it's just an amazing book. Definitely, if you're interested in China or history or women, it's well worth a read. But here you see these are probably imperial robes, and you see the phoenix design there. Beautiful embroidery. Now, this might have been the something that led to the original. This is mentioned. It's a pheasant, and it's a male pheasant. The male pheasant is a lot more colorful than the dowdy female. Japan, I think these are Japanese. This is Japanese, yeah. And you see, so this is a male and the female, the 2 pheasants or phoenixes together. And here's another one. And I want to say, one time I was befriended by Yamabushi. Blavatsky writes about the Yamabushi in her tale, The Bewitched Life, which takes place in Japan. And he could read my thoughts. I never had to ask him a question because he'd just read my thoughts and answer them. Very, very remarkable person. And he took me to a temple in Kyoto, which, like a lot of temples, has these beautiful gold screens. And he said, look around, look at the birds and the flowers and the trees, and it's telling a story. And this is kind of the story of the human evolution. And at the end of it, the 2 birds are together. So somehow, and I found this, I was surprised, when I gave the talk about how the Buddha became the Buddha, that there was predictions about his wife Yasodhara from, billions of years ago. So somehow there is this idea also, even in Buddhism, which, is not big on, just like the Bible, really, Jesus isn't big on marriage, but that there's some sort of human consummation involves the linkage of the male yin and yang, symbolized by these 2 phoenixes. And this is the Phoenix Hall of Byodo-in Temple. This is just amazing. It's one of my favorite temples in Japan, which is saying a lot. It was based on the Pure Land Sutra of Amitabha. So again, we go back to Amitabha, and the image of Amitabha is inside this. So the Pure Land Sutra, it's a very important sutra. Maybe the majority, or not majority, but the largest number of Buddhist adherents in the world are probably followers of Pure Land to some degree. And it describes the Pure Land that was created by Amitabha Buddha. And Subba Rao wrote a very interesting article, or anyway, there are notes of his discussion of the first ray in Buddhism, where he associates the first ray with Amitabha Buddha. And I would say also with the red ray. So this is the phoenix that is on the Phoenix Hall. And you find also with Shinto, this is a portable shrine that is taken around the cities. And this is in my neighborhood in Tokyo also. They have a portable shrine very much like this to bless the neighborhood once or twice a year. And you see on the top, here's the phoenix. And little phoenixes here as well. So the phoenix is all over the place in Japan. And in a temple near Kyoto Station, Higashi Honganji, it's a Pure Land temple. They have very few decorations. It's very simple, as the Pure Land teaching itself is. But they have carved at the top these golden carvings of phoenixes. So the phoenix, actually, The name of the founder of the True Pure Land sect, Shinran, is his name. Ron means phoenix. Okay, we're moving somewhere else in the world now. We got to get to not every continent, but more. Here's a feathered serpent. So this is Quetzalcoatl's name means a feathered serpent, I believe, and in Mesoamerica, they had more than one people who worshipped or valued the feathered serpent. So the idea of feathers and serpent coming together is like those two principles, which are often antagonistic, are somehow unified, harmonized. So I want to talk about from now about, and this is sort of expanding it in a real different direction, about the relationship of big birds and serpents, or serpents. So here, this is from Revelation chapter 12. It's right at the middle of the Revelation. Usually you look to the beginning, end, and the middle to know what a book is about. And this is a really important turning point. This is where the woman clothed in the sun appears. In my own opinion, it's a cosmogonic myth. I think HBB shares that opinion. This myth and its variants, Hindu variants, I think is at the very heart of the secret doctrine, the story of the secret doctrine, not the abstract philosophical principles, but understanding the story that connects cosmogenesis and anthropogenesis. This is a story. So when the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth, so Michael and the red dragon are both in heaven, or in a super mundane state. And they're both archangels. They both have followings. And Michael launches a preemptive strike against the dragon and throws him down to earth. If you read chapter 12, that's what it says. When the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth by his fellow archangel Michael, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness, where she would be taken care of for a time, times, and a half a time. I guess that is 3.5 times, out of the serpent's reach. So the dragon is not called a serpent until he touches the earth. This is written very closely. And you see that the woman is given wings. She becomes a sort of bird. And underlying the antagonism or the opposition between the serpent and the bird. Now, Vishnu has 2 vehicles, and one is a serpent, Shesha or Ananta. He has those 2 names. The great white serpent, he's Tamas. And Shesha, just a small movement of Shesha will just turn the universe upside down. So Shesha probably doesn't move around a whole lot. And then you have Garuda, who is Superbird. He even defeats Indra, the king of the gods. He's very, very powerful. And Shesha and Garuda get along because Shesha's a good serpent, but there's good and bad serpents. Garuda's always good somehow. He's not real mischievous like, say, Hanuman. And so they're on good terms, but Garuda is always ready to attack and devour serpents, especially naughty ones. But actually, the Nagas are his cousin. The enmity between snakes and Garuda goes back to the rivalry between their respective mothers. And those mothers are both daughters of Daksha and wives of Kashyapa. And Kashyapa is the progenitor of almost all the different kind of beings in the cosmos, including humans, devas, asuras, and here Nagas, Gandharvas, etc. Now, this story we'll start it with the churning of the ocean of milk. You have the asuras on this side holding the head of the serpent. This is Vasuki, one of the kings of the serpents. And these are the devas here, and they're holding the tail. And this is Mount Meru, and it's perched on the back of a turtle. Again, the turtle's in the ocean. And all these good things coming out of the Mount Meru as they're churning it. And one of the good things is Amrita, eternal life, and that's what everybody really wants. But also, Uchai Shravas is this horse, this white horse here. It's going to play a part in the story. So now I want to just say structurally, this is the same as the picture that you just saw. So here's the Asura, Duryodhana, standing at the head of Krishna, and Arjuna standing at his feet. So both of them rushed because they were rushing to get the support of Krishna. And Krishna was playing possum. And when he woke up, the first person he saw, of course, was Arjuna, who was standing respectfully at Krishna's feet. So he gave the boon to Arjuna. He gave the two of them a choice. Do you want like army of 100 million men equipped with all kinds of weapons and etc., elephants and so forth, or do you want me to be your guide and charioteer? And of course, Arjuna made the right, it's a choice between one and many. That's a basic philosophical choice in life. Do you want one or do you want many? And Arjuna made the right choice, which was to choose Krishna as his charioteer. So I'm just saying here, okay, they have the head, the Asuras have the head, they're getting the fire from the head, and the Devas are in a much more comfortable position, just pulling the tail. Okay. Now, Kadru and Vinata, these are the two sisters who are married to Kashyapa. Kadru wants to, I guess they do this big ceremony so that they can have the children that they want. And I forgot all the details. There's a lot of details in Indian myths. But anyway, Kadru decides she wants to have lots of kids. And she gives birth to the Nagas, the serpents. And Vinata doesn't want a lot of kids. She just wants really strong kids. And so Kadru's kids are born first, and all these serpents around, and Vinata's kind of looking at it, and she says, I wish I had some kids. And so she had just two eggs, and she opened up one of the eggs, and inside was Dawn, Arun. And Arun gets really angry. Why'd you open it up before it was time for me to be born? And so he curses her and says, you're going to be the slave to your sister because of this, you and your kids. And there's all kinds of curses. First, in those kind of Indian myths, as soon as a person's born, they're doing all kinds of stuff. They're talking, they're intelligent. And so it's obviously not the physical world. It's sort of on an inner plane where that can happen. So, and eventually the second egg is just there. And that's the one that Garuda is born from. So the two sisters are looking at the white horse that's born from the pillar of the churning of the sea of milk. And Kadru says, I bet that horse's tail's black. And Vinata said, what do you mean? It's a white horse. Its tail's not black. So she says, okay, let's make a bet. And the person that loses will be the slave of the other one. Okay. So what she does, she goes to her kids, the snakes, and the black one, she says, hey, go and get on the horse's tail and make it look black. So some of them said, no, we're not going to do that bad thing. She said, come on, do it. No way. So she curses the kids. They're cursing a lot, But some of them don't go and do it, and the horse's tail looks black, and her sister has to become her slave. Okay. I mean, only in India. This is gonna. I think I'm going over time now, right? Or getting close to it. So I'll have to wind up.
Jeffrey,
yeah,
we have technically the whole meeting's going to close in about 4 minutes.
Oh.
So,
okay.
what do you want to do?
Okay. I'll just.
Because I would like to have a couple minutes.
I'll finish up really quickly, and then
we can do some Q&A, but it'll just be like going over. So
yeah, right, fine. Okay, thank you for letting me know. So I want to say this is what the result of this, since the snakes were cursed. A curse, if Brahma can cancel curses, but if he doesn't, he lets them go into effect. It's going to happen, no matter what you think or what you do. And so the snakes were cursed, and Arjuna's great grandson. Arjuna's grandson was killed by one of the snake kings, Takshaka. And so the son, Arjuna's great grandson, Janamejaya, decides to have a snake sacrifice. And so the sages come and they say all these things in this yajna, and all the snakes are attracted to the fire and they're burning up. And but somebody comes and stops it, Astika, whose mother is a snake, and he's able to stop it. And so after that, the snakes and the Kurus get along quite well. Now, this is the setting for the Mahabharata. If you look at Adiparva, which has been translated into English, that's the first book of you'll see there's a once this snake sacrifice, the Sarpasatra Yajna is over, Vaishampayana is asked to recite the tale that he heard from Vyasa, namely the Mahabharata. And this fact is revealed by Ugra Srava to Saunaka at the very beginning of the Mahabharata. In other words, somehow the snake versus, and this is related to the snake versus Buddhism mothers who started this whole ball rolling. Somehow this is the beginning of the Mahabharata and is reflected, in my opinion, in the rivalry between the Asuras and the Devas, which is kind of what makes the world go round. Okay, and then this is also related to Vritra and Indra. Vritra was a Brahmin. He prevented water, again, the snake and water. He prevented water from coming to the earth, so there was a drought. So Indra killed him and committed a crime, Brahmin murder. And the sacrifice, but for the world to go forward, there has to be the sacrifice of Ahi. So Ahi is the name of Vritra. It means snake, or Ahura or Asura, who are the firstborn. They're the higher existing on a higher plane. And Ahi is also a name for the Dhyan Chohans, who are in the first 3 levels of the cosmos, are the 21 Dhyan Chohans. So again, they have to be killed. In other words, they have to be superseded by a lower, in quotes, a lower deity, the spirit reaching out toward matter. Okay, and anyway, this is Kartikeya is one of those lower deals. Michael is also. So in Anthropogenesis, Blavatsky connects Michael, Kartikeya, the war god of the Hindus, and also Indra, and saying, you know, for evolution to go forward, they have to do that. They have to create a lower plane on which lower beings such as ourselves can be born and evolve. Okay, that's it.
Wow, Jeff, you just took us through around the world, through time, BC, Common Era, through languages, through poetry, through mythology of all kinds, philosophy, mysticism, and what a lively erudition. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you have time for a few questions? I'd like to just start off with one question. It just seems like, how can something die and come back, right? But if its fundamental realities is outside of space and time, then wouldn't that explain how it could come into time and space and then withdraw? If you could talk about that just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, its fundamental reality is not born. Obviously, it's not subject to space and time, but I guess somehow it's cyclically it emerges and keeps on emerging again and again. It's sort of on this trajectory where it does that. And if we think about what, you know, HPV says that there's space, there's motion, and there's continuity or duration. So you're sort of asking how I guess the question is how can the unmanifest become the manifest, right? And I guess in every case it needs a HBB says that Michael is a being by slaying the dragon and or bringing down the dragon. He's turning the unmanifest into the manifest. Now, in that process, I mean, whatever becomes manifest is just a partial manifestation. If you think of every color is within every color that we see are 6 other colors of the sevenfold prism, right? On the inner plane. Is that making any sense? I think you've asked a really hard question, which I can't really answer.
I think you're doing great. But maybe other people have questions, really hard questions. That's what happens is when you do a present like that, you're going to get some hard questions because that was a pretty deep and broad subject that you just handled beautifully.
Well, you gave it to me. I didn't ask for it. You gave me this topic, which actually turned out to be completely different. I mean, I guess on some level, you know, what I thought, who cares if there's a phoenix or not? I mean, if you just think of it as just a bird, right? I mean, it's like some unusual bird, like an ostrich or something. But it turns out that there's a whole wealth of ideas associated with, and they reach across continents. That's what surprised me. Just the similarities of, say, Egypt and China, and in some respects, I didn't get into that. India, regarding the serpent and the transforming into a bird and then back into a serpent or turtle.
That was something that we definitely picked up in your presentation, because a lot of times with the second object, you could say, of the Theosophical movement, you know, the ancient and modern philosophies, religions and sciences and so forth, you get a certain point of view. Like in a few weeks from now, we're going to do a deep dive into some very Buddhist concepts, for example, or very Christian concepts or what like that. And then that's cool because then we look at the whole system from that point of view. But here you've got this in time and out of time concept through the bird and the serpent, as you did, in all time and in all cultures. Pretty remarkable. All the way starting from the idea of the bun, all the way to just everything that you did. So it's like it's a lens into every system. It just seemed that's just what I thought I was picking up.
You know, Jonathan, in reply to your question, which I think is a really good one, like I think what Zhuangzi said has a lot to do with this, like how something can emerge from the higher world and continue is because there's the water and the wind, you know. So the emergent thing is fire. I mean, it's a firebird, and we didn't get into that. I mean, there's a whole thing about Agni carrying, you know, being the firebird, but it needs the wind and the water there as well. There's something, and I think now in our culture we're sort of focused on splashy stuff, you know, something that is obviously manifest, but behind that has to be the wind to support the wings and the water to support the boat. So I think real spiritual practice is always developing that wind and that water. Wind being the spirit and water being sort of the primordial wisdom.
And
yeah, I think without that, there can't be a continuous, you know, something like the Phoenix, which will continue a long time. And I guess we're hoping that the Phoenix is the masters, you know, will continue, you know, to arise from the ashes. I mean, that's what I think one of the things that our movement's all about.
You mind developing that a little more about the masters?
Well, I mean, HBB talks about the struggles to keep the sacred teaching alive in Europe. There was a, like Herodotus, for example. I think HBB says Herodotus was an initiate. Okay, so in a way, you're reading something then, knowing that or believing that, you're seeing something in Herodotus that's maybe a little different from, he's just, writing about some bird they heard about. He's saying, I think what he's saying about the phoenix there is about initiation. So it's about, dying and being reborn is first, the Brahmins speak about twice born or thrice born. I guess the Egyptians do too. What that means is that you died and you're reborn. So the judge talks about how we have to remove all of our attachment to the body little by little. And by doing that, we can be reborn, and we're being reborn in the subtle world with full awareness and coordination of our astral or subtle body. That's the kind of, as the little cicadas that we are, that's the kind of death and rebirth that we want, right? And if we can have that, if people can continue to have that, then the teachings of the masters of the sacred science is going to go forward, is going to be transmitted to generations to come. That's the real regeneration. It's not, some political system or something like that. So, yeah, I think
I would back up, because that's something else I've been wondering about is why Easter and why hope with relation to the phoenix. Why is there so much? What is there so fundamentally hopeful about the resurrection, you could say, in light of this idea of the phoenix? And I'm going to jump away for a minute. This is me trying to save my computer from crashing. So that doesn't mean I'm not interested.
Oh, you're trying to resurrect your computer, or just keep it going?
I am. Oh, we also have another question about Abraxas, the bird and the snake. I don't know what I just asked about, but Ken does.
Carl Jung has written about Abraxas.
Carl Jung has written about it.
Yeah, that's good. I didn't explore that. That's something that I would need to look at, because I don't know very much. Is that Gnostic or? Yeah, I don't know very much about Gnosticism, so I'm sorry I can't really respond. Maybe you can tell us something about it, about the bird and the snake regarding Abraxas is often symbolized as a bird, like a rooster, isn't it?
Yeah, like a rooster-headed man with a snake-like feet or legs.
Okay, that's something. Yeah, I'll.
I think we might have to end the meeting. I can't figure out how to get this computer to charge.
Oh, okay.
I think our time is up. And anyway, gosh, so we will try and get this thing posted on the YouTube pretty soon. So, Jeffrey, thank you for your labor of love there. I really appreciate it. What a college education that was. And it was like a whole course just now. So,
yeah.
Yeah, how many units do you get?
Very much.
How many units do you get?
Yeah, right. That was like 5 units right there, I thought. So.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Sorry that I didn't bring my charger. So
I've been charged.
thank you all very much. Next week, we will be hearing about the posture. It's called mental posture. Kind of the posture that the disciple might put themselves into, or that any person that would put themselves into, kind of an intelligent receptivity in terms of preparing oneself to learn. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay.
Magnificent.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Nice.
Yeah, that was,
Terrific.
there you go, Monica. Monica, your reading is just incredible.
Yeah.
Gosh. If I could read like that, anyway,
We'll have her sing next time.
Very inspiring.
Thank you.
this
Thank you.
material.
thank you so much.
So, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.